Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Today is beautiful December the 27th, 2016. Hope that everyone had a very happy holiday season and a Merry Christmas. I also want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America. And also thanks for following Charlton and Big C Sports, the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and his good old boys, as well as the number one media company in the United States, the iHeart Media Network. I also love saying thank you for listening to Charlton and Big C Sports from across the pond in Paris, France, as well as London, England. And of course, our good old boys from Canada. But until my voice gets better, I'm not going to sing Canada. I'm wondering if I'm getting some negative vibes from you Canadians and not singing your song right. So I do apologize for that, Big C. And of course, I love no one more than the land of the free and the home of the brave. How's it going for you good old boys down south, Big C?
Charlton, just a beautiful, beautiful day down here, man. Everything that you could ever ask for. We got Mother Nature. We got the bowls getting ready to kick off. You got the Peach Bowl getting ready to go down here in the Atlanta area. You got the University of number one undefeated. Can't nobody beat us.
Yeah.
And I guess you call them dogs. Well, you guys call them huskies.
You dub, baby.
West, trying to crawl across. You know what happened last time Alabama played a four-legged animal from the West Coast? He was left more than with just his tongue hanging. So, what's the expectation, for the weekend coming up?
Hey, there's a lot of animal rights lovers out here, so be careful when you're giving moonshine to horses and also dogs. And I just want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And of course, Big C is the one with the mud. And also, Big C, I don't know if you have that, what do you call that, catfish smell? That's probably gone because right now we're having a lot of turkeys. Does it smell like turkey now, Big C?
Well, what Charlton, we got turkey. We got a few other critters that's running out of the woods this time of the year, trying to search for greener pastures, and they have to get caught in the roadway, one way or another. They don't make it to their destination. But, they're happy to come home with me from time to time, Charlton. They find a nice resting place for them, a nice warm oven, a pot, to make them humble.
Well, Big C, number one, we always appreciate the Cadillac Escalade. In fact, I almost got hit by one today. I was walking, I was admiring the car so much, I wasn't paying attention to how good the Escalade looked, and I almost walked right in front of that car, but luckily it has some sensors because they didn't even give me the bird finger, Big C. They just stopped, Big C, so I was very happy about that. But I do know, be careful when you're crossing the streets, guys, especially when you're admiring vehicles, Big C. And speaking of admiring vehicles, what's going on with the Buffalo Bills and Rex Ryan? Here's a guy that was nearly in the playoffs the last 2 years, but it wasn't quite enough, Big C. I think they showed him his walking papers, Big C.
They let the Ryan brothers go, Charlton. Rex and Rob both were dismissed today by the Buffalo Bills. And, this is an organization that's been in turmoil, Charlton. It's been 17 years since the Buffalo Bills has made the playoffs. Everybody remember the heyday of the 4 consecutive Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Even though they came up unvictorious in any of them, Charlton, but 4 consecutive Super Bowls. And that's hard to replicate in any era, Charlton, having a team that being that dominant in a division. But, this is a team that's really unsettled. Not only did they fire the Ryan brothers today, Charlton, but there's also some talk of replacing Tyrod Taylor, the quarterback, with Emmanuel, the number one quarterback taken about 3 years ago in the NFL draft, much to everyone's, dismay out of Florida State. But, they feel that they're going to give him a chance, the last game of the season, see what potentially there may be there with him, because the way Tyrod Taylor's contract is structured, Charlton, this is something they want to take a look at, and they want to give whoever they bring in as a new head coach something to look at as far as competition other than having a bad lineup. But, the Bills, it's hard to get players to go up to that area, Charles, in free agency.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things when you look at the geographics of the United States, where do players want to play? They look at the tax base. It is one of the things. Florida is also very inviting when it comes to taxes, as well as Texas. And so players take those things into consideration. Plus, what do you have up in Buffalo, the greater, upper New York area, Charlton, when you think about that? The climate is miserable this time of the year.
Yeah.
Players take that into consideration. You're playing in an open stadium. And like you said, for 17 years, this team has not made the playoffs.
Wow, that's a big thing. And you also know, when you look at their schedule this year, they're still 7-8 going into the final week of the season. Even against the NFC, they're 3-1 against the NFC. They're only 4-7 against the AFC. At home, they're 4-4, and on the road, they're 3-4. But here's a team that's so close to knocking open that door for the playoffs. It's just amazing. They're going to replace Ryan and hope to find somebody new to come up in there and make them have more success in the next year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, how do you turn around a program in a season? That's the most difficult thing to do. I think a couple of teams got blindsided when you had some coaches like Barry Switzer, John Gruden walk into a program and go to the Super Bowl right away. But, those programs they inherited, Charlton, they were already winning programs. You have to look at the NFL and see the coaches that are hired, brought into these losing organizations, Charlton, and see how many of them have turned the organization around in 1-2 years. It just doesn't happen. You look at your buddies out there on the West Coast in San Francisco. What has happened with that organization since Harbaugh has been gone 2 years? It has gotten worse in the last 2 years, Charlton, because of player deprivation. You just don't have the depth there. And when you look across the league, look at Chicago when they brought in John Fox out of Denver, okay? That was a winning organization, Charlton. Getting to the Super Bowl even with that organization, doesn't being blasted by Seattle, they let it go.
Yeah, that's true.
Chicago, that organization hasn't gotten better because it was devoid of talent. And this is what you have to look at, Charlton, when you bring in a coach. You're talking about bringing in a genius. But, are you bringing in 53 geniuses to play for it, Charlton? You have to retool the organization, not the coaching staff. When you change about 12 to 15 personnel on a team, Charlton, and half of those are starters, then players get the message. If you can't keep the same status quo in the lineup every year and saying that a coach will fix it, because these players are already mentally inept. What they're going to do, they're set in their ways because they make so much money, and some of them have guaranteed money, and some of them made more money than they need the rest of their lives. So they don't care. We can keep blaming coaches, but that's not always the solution.
When you look at Buffalo, they lost to the Dolphins 34-31, an overtime game, and had they won that game or not going into overtime, maybe we're not talking about changing your job, but getting fired when you're knocking on the door to the playoffs. There are a lot of coaches that are not even going to win 7 games this year, and there's no talk about firing those guys, Big C, but we know that's part of the business when you get into this world. Another thing about coaching, let's look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're talking about that good old boy network. And before I even get into the good old boy network, I just want to say the Ryan brothers, they do not need the Rooney Rule. Have you noticed that, Big C? They will land on their feet somewhere. But I just think that when you have two brothers being fired at the same time, they're going to find a job, maybe not for the same team, but they will get in. The Rooney Rule probably won't even matter for Buffalo, because I doubt if they're going to extend themselves that far to look at any of the great African-American coaching that's out there, Big C. But let's look south, and we look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's a team that was in the playoffs consistently under Jack Del Rio now with the Raiders. Now they're looking at bringing in who? Who's going to go turn that organization around, Big C?
Well, they're talking about Tom Coughlin, Charlton. And you have to look at professional sports now as a generational thing. When you look at the NBA, the coaches are getting younger in the NBA, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because they're more transparent with the players. They more of that era. And when you look at the displacement of age around the professional leagues, Charlton, and you see what has happened. And even the Jaguars, talking about Tom Coughlin, yes, he's had a tremendous amount of success, Charlton, with the New York Giants.
Yeah.
But he had not won in the last 5 years prior to being fired with the New York Giants, Charlton. Tom Coughlin is 71 years old, okay?
Yeah.
71 years old. And the Jacksonville Jaguars have the youngest team in the NFL. So how does that translate mentality and era-wise when you look at that? You're bringing in a guy that's more than 2 times older, Charlton, than your oldest player on your roster. Basically 3 times older.
Yeah.
Than the oldest player on your roster. And you're saying that he's going to be able communicate his ways, his mindset with the modern day player, Charlton. It's not going to happen. That's what happened to him with the New York Giants, Charlton. He lost contact when you had a wealth of retirement from the Giants after that last Super Bowl team. He was left with a young cast.
Yeah.
And this young cast is basically what's playing today for the New York Giants. All but about 10 of those players are players that he brought into that organization.
Yeah.
And so he could not deal with today's modern player, Charlton, socially. And that's where a lot of these coaches, I mean, we look at Phil Jackson using the posse era, on players in the NBA. And that's what Coughlin is. Players were lambasting him prior to him being dismissed from the Giants by the Mara family.
Yeah.
And so this is what you're going to get. You bring him into Jacksonville, Charlton, you have a generational gap between the modern player and the old established coach who was losing prior to getting fired from his last job. And you're expecting for a losing coach to come into a losing organization and reestablish something that's in a bygone era that he lost, contact with 10 years ago in the NFL.
Yeah, and if you look at Jacksonville, they were 3-12 right now in the season. They're 2-3 in the division, 1-3 against the NFC. They're 2-9 against the AFC. At home, they're 2-6. In a way, they're 1-6. They did knock off Tennessee, knocking them out of the playoffs when Mariota got a broken leg, Big C. But again, bringing in an older gentleman, maybe if he's in the front office, that might make sense. But to try to motivate young men between 20 and 30 years old may not be the guy that they want to listen to, Big C. But, you're going to give the guy a chance. If he's a woman, there'd be no talk about giving a 71-year-old woman a job. But Coughlin, if he can do it, that's great. But you just wonder why they keep having this coaching carousels in the NFL, going up to guys that were fired as opposed to the new kids out of the college era that show great promise down the road, Big C. And I also want to say this segment is sponsored by the California Lottery. What can a buck do for you? I'm telling you right now, I could go buy about a gallon of cough syrup, Big C, so I would not sound like JT the Brick. One time I was listening to JT the Brick and I said, why don't that brother just go and get some cough syrup? But I also realized that he also hangs out at the Black Hole at the Coliseum, so maybe I understand why his voice was so raspy, Big C. So I apologize for you, JT the Brick. I thought he was just born that way, Big C. But also, when you look around the NFL right now, just seeing the game last night, Dallas, there's something about their defense. Their offense, we know they've been great. Their defense was a little bit maligned throughout the season. Now, Big C, they're making plays on defense, and they take a quarterback and Matt Stafford, who a lot of people were saying this guy should be up for the MVP. I think Terry Bradshaw was saying that. But Stafford last night did not look like he should be up for the MVP. I think he was sacked 3 times, and he could not get out of the pocket, especially when he had guys that are 6'5" and 6'6" rushing off the edge. If you're an MVP type quarterback, I mean, Dak Prescott evaded it all the time, and he's a rookie. And I'm not saying nothing bad about Stafford, but he could not get out of the way. At the end, he threw a couple of interceptions, and it cost the Detroit Lions. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, how about them Cowboys?
How about them Cowboys? Yeah.
You got this young quarterback. I think last night he completed 75% of his passes. I guess that's the best of when you got Tony Romo as a backup.
Yeah.
And a bench warmer. And maybe that even silenced the critics once and for all that who is Tony Romo other than Dak Prescott's backup? Because this guy has proven his point as far as being an NFL starting quarterback. 3 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
75% completion ratio, Charlton, against a guy, as you say, that people were touting for the past month as an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
And now he's being touted as might not be making the playoffs because his opponent next week is the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that they've been hotter than fish grease, for the past month and a half, Charlton.
And see,
so, with Aaron Rodgers coming to town, this may be the swan song for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
And this is a team, Charlton, is devoid of a running game, and that's their biggest headache right now, is that they have a running game. They played this rookie running back out of North Dakota State last night. He had 67 yards rushing, but that's not going to carry you in the playoffs, Charlton. And a lot of those yards were misdirectional yards that, people were expecting Detroit to pass. But Dallas, when Detroit got up on them, Dallas woke up. They were up 21-14, and that was it. Katie barred the door. They closed the door on Matt Stafford and the Detroit Lions offense. which they right now lack that big play receiver. That's what Detroit is lacking. No one has come to the forefront to say, hey, I'm the go-to guy. You know, when you can depend on Anquan Bolden, a 35-year-old receiver, as much as you can on a 25-year-old receiver.
Oh, yeah.
And you have this tight end Ebram out of Oklahoma State that they drafted #1 overall about 3 years ago, who has not developed into that all-pro type tight end. He's not Antonio Gates. Okay? A young Antonio Gates. He just seems lackluster in his performance out there, Charlton, and not getting all of what they can. They got 3 first-round draft picks on the offensive line, and yet they could not protect Stafford last night.
Well, Big C.
Dallas got to him on several occasions, and they, run out of the pocket, Charlton.
Yeah.
And as you say, force him into those interceptions. And that's what you can't do this late in the season if you expect to be a Super Bowl contender. You look at the New York Giants. Same type of performance out of an Eli Manning against the Eagles a couple of weeks ago, where he threw his 3 interceptions. But Matthew Stafford really could not afford that last night, and Dallas just solidified themselves as being the #1 team in the NFC, Charlton.
Well, Big C, I think what you look at, too, and I just want to go back to holding people accountable for what they say, whether their voice was good or bad, Big C. I still remember last night after the game, just watching some of the the post-game show, and your favorite friend Trent Dilfer, who was also one of those good old boys that were saying that Tony Romo would be a better quarterback for the Cowboys, even after I think they had 10 wins at the time, and now he's saying Prescott is playing like a 7-year veteran. He said the same thing about good old boy down there, Carson Wentz, for the Eagles. I just want to say you've been consistent the whole year. You were saying this guy should have been the #1 pick coming out of college, out of Mississippi State, and you talked about his tutelage, the guy who coached him down at Mississippi State, and how he's been around some of the top talent in the NFL. And now all the good old boys are starting to say the same thing that you were saying, Big C. Now that Prescott's going to most likely be the MVP unless they steal it from him. There's no way you give it to Brady you can't give Brady the MVP for being fined for 4 games and suspended for 4 games. That's not a good look for the NFL, especially when you look at a guy like Prescott that's played the whole season. There's still some talk that they should bench him for the final game, Big C. I think that would be a mistake because you don't want to kill the momentum. If anything, play him 3 quarters. If they really want to see Romo, let him play the 4th quarter if the Cowboys have a good lead. So I understand that. I just want to get your thoughts on benching Prescott. It makes no sense to bench him. They have momentum, Big C.
Charlton, you never kill your momentum. It'd be like a race car driver pulling over to the side of the road saying, hey, everybody else go ahead on past me, and I'll catch up with you later. That's basically what would happen to the Cowboys. If they bench Prescott, they might as well not even show up for their first-round playoff game. Well, they'll have a first-round bye, but that second-round game, because it'll be over before it starts, Charlton. You'll just kill all the mojo of the team, not just Prescott, but the rest of the team will be mentally distraught, drained, because here it is, ownership messing with the continuity that they have. And you talk about Brady being an MVP running, he's not even the MVP, Charlton, on his own team.
Yeah, on his team. That's Blunt. Yeah, we have Blunt, yeah.
Blunt is the MVP of the New England Patriots. And of the AFC, when you look at it, the guy has 17 rushing touchdowns, Charlton. Just been a workhorse all year long. When you think about the productivity that he's provided for that offense, and he did it before Brady came back from the suspension, Charlton, and it's continued since Brady been in the lineup. Brady has had a wonderful year, but here's a quarterback, technically, if you look at his record, the best he can do this season, Charlton, is 11-1 as a starter.
Yeah.
Okay? 11-1 as a starter. So 11 wins is not going to get you the MVP, and Dak Prescott already has 13. Okay?
Yeah.
That's not going to be the answer to the MVP, because if that's the case, you just open the door for everybody. And you talked about Stafford. He's a quarterback that may be on a 500 team.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah, that's true, Big C. Yeah.
Ryan's only 10-5 as a starter. So when you look at these quarterbacks and they talk about the MVP quarterbacks, who's the most valuable quarterback to this team when you look at it? What were the Dallas Cowboys last year as a record? I believe they had 4 victories.
Yeah, about 4, yeah.
4 victories. They were 4-12 last year. The Dallas Cowboys right now are 13-2. They have eclipsed their loss record from last year with victories by 1 thus far. And people are saying this has not been one of the greatest turnarounds in the NFL in past decades, Charlton.
Yeah.
That you're taking a team that couldn't even get out of the locker room before they lost the game last year. And you're bringing this young rookie quarterback and this young rookie running back, and you now have the best record in the NFL with basically the same team personnel.
Yeah.
How can you say he's not the MVP?
Well, Big C, everybody has their own opinions. I just want to say this segment is sponsored by United Labor. Guaranteed $100,000 life insurance. No medical questions. We're also endorsed by the American Heart Association and the American Cancer Society. We work with all of the unions in the country under the AFL-CIO, and we're looking to hire over 1,000 insurance brokers. Tweet out to Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. You know, Big C, if you look at teams like New England, yeah, they're a great team, and they're 13-2. Their 2 losses have come at home. That's going to give some team on the road some hope for the playoffs. I think the Raiders are pretty much done because they don't have Carr, who was really coming on strong, maybe as an MVP type player. I think Kansas City can go in there and win, even though they tried it last year. But they're not as invincible. And the Steelers, they always look good. I don't count them out until they're out, Big C. Your thoughts? New England, would they be vulnerable at home, Big C?
Well, you know, when you think about it, Charlton, you look at Brady since he's been the quarterback in the postseason for the Patriots. He's won 22 postseason games, Charlton, and that's more than half the teams that are going to be in the playoffs when you think about it.
Wow.
So his success ratio at home has been phenomenal, and even on the road. You know, you look at the number of Super Bowls that this team has been to since he's been the quarterback, unparalleled in the NFL. So, you know, they do have vulnerabilities, but every team in the NFL has vulnerabilities. You know, you talk about the Raiders, you know, having McGowan going at quarterback since Carr's been injured. And they're going to be facing Denver, a true test. This is going to be a playoff atmosphere in his first game as a starter since 2013.
Yeah.
But, you know, hopefully the Raiders can rekindle what they had in the last game that they played against the Broncos, you know, on that Thursday night game when they rushed for over 200 yards, Charlton.
Yeah.
That's what they're really going to need against the Denver Broncos. They're going to have to get out there with that running game. That's what, if they're going to get anywhere in the playoffs, the Raiders are going to have to establish the ground game, Charlton, because McGowan is not the same passer that Carr was.
No.
And when you think about the continuity that he had developed all season long and even last season, Charlton, with his receiving core, that timing is not going to be there. You're not going to bring in a backup quarterback, and that's the same thing that would happen in Dallas. That same timing that Prescott has with the receiving core in Dallas, you could not expect for Romo to have that after sitting down for a year and a half and coming in there. And that's what you have in Oakland with McGowan. Basically 3 years of rust of a quarterback coming in and said, okay, now you have to get this done for us. You know, not only with the rust, Charlton, but the panic and unawareness of what a defense is going to do.
Yeah.
And expect for Denver to blitz him all night long. But, you know, when you look around this playoff scenario that's coming down, all roads in the AFC go through New England.
Yeah.
And you got the Dolphins in the playoffs, you got the Chiefs and the Raiders in the playoffs. Some of these teams are going to knock off each other before they get to New England. New England will always be playing a lower seed, and they will be playing in Foxborough. And when they come from a warmer climate, Charlton, it's going to be tough if you get one of those warm climate teams like Miami going up to New England in December, early January, and it's only 12 degrees.
And when you think about it, the Raiders are the highest scoring team in the AFC, 410 points. New England has 406. Only Atlanta with 502 points has scored more points than the Raiders, as well as New Orleans has scored also 437 points in the NFC. So that's going to be a tough out for the Raiders just going forward, Big C. I also want to say this final segment is sponsored by One Life America. Life insurance, we're the leaders in the country when it comes to final expense. Tweet out to Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. Also looking to hire over 1,000 licensed insurance brokers. Big C, as we get on to the world of NFL football, Frank Gore, is he 32 years old or is he 45 years old? But either way, he's still balling, Big C. Your thoughts on the great Frank Gore?
Well, Charlton, when you look at Frank Gore and what he's accomplished this season, Charlton, he's only 36 yards away from a 1,000-yard season, which would make him the oldest back, above 33 years of age to gain 1,000 yards in a season. The last one to do that, Charlton, was the great John Riggins, a Hall of Fame running back. With the Washington Redskins, an original #1 draft pick of the New York Jets out of the University of Kansas. and gained fame with the Hawks offensive line in Washington with a couple Super Bowl, appearances and MVP against the Dolphins down in Pasadena. But, this is a running back in Frank Gore. When you look at the Indianapolis Colts as a whole, this is supposed to be a team that, led by Andrew Luck. All this great accolades and his continuous receive, but yet lack of productivity. But, he's not going to go anywhere because the expectations are great of him. But Frank Gore, people have been saying he was washed up when San Francisco let him go. Charlton, back-to-back 1,000-yard season in Indianapolis. This man, is timeless when you look at it. And without Frank Gore in the backfield, what would their offense really have been when you think of just the inconsistency elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, Big C, I tell you, Frank Gore was on the same 49ers staff that Harbaugh was coaching when they were in the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens. And he's still playing, but he's not good enough to stay in San Francisco. Just think about that when you're the personnel.
Doesn't San Francisco have a 1,000-yard rusher?
No.
Oh, okay. But my bad. So you let a guy go that was gaining 1,000 yards for you. You replace him with a guy who can't gain 1,000 yards for you. And you're saying that the quarterback is the problem because you don't have a running back that can gain 1,000 yards?
Well, Big C, on top of that, we talked about the coaches being let go, the Ryan brothers being let go in Buffalo. If you look at San Francisco, Bolden's still playing. He wasn't good enough to play for the 49ers, but he's still playing for Detroit. I believe he's playing for Detroit. And also,
he played last night in the game.
Yeah.
Think about offensive lineman Johnson down in Arizona playing. Everybody who left that 49ers organization, Johnson, who wanted to continue playing in NFL, is still playing.
Yeah.
There was a running back, receiver, linebacker, offensive lineman, defensive lineman.
Yeah.
All this Smith is with the Raiders.
Yeah.
So everybody that was in that organization that helped that team to a Super Bowl appearance, Charlton, to an NFC Championship appearance, Charlton, that organization felt not the type of personnel that they wanted in that organization because they were winners.
Yeah.
Okay? You guys are winners, and we can't have that around here.
And
we're going to go out here and we're going to get a bunch of people who don't want to block, who don't want to tackle, and that's going to be the face of our franchise.
Yeah.
We're going to blame it all on the quarterback.
And who's the tight end that's playing?
When he was on the bench,
he
was being blamed for the losses.
Well, see, who's
this is an organization that, if they ever call for a scrap heap, the 49ers should be number one on the line.
I tell you, who's the receiver, the tight end playing right now for the Redskins that also played for the 49ers? Vernon.
Look at what Delaney Walker's done the past couple of years down in Tennessee.
Yeah.
The other tight end that they had.
So why doesn't Ted Robinson and these good old boys, he and his sidekick, they keep saying, well, Kaepernick, they could get a lot of money for Kaepernick, and if they got rid of his contract and let another player go that was in the Super Bowl, that's how, when you look at a team, if they don't want a player because of whatever reason, that's their choice. But if you're in the game to lose games, if you're in the business of losing games, and you just ran down some of the same players that they let go that are helping teams compete for playoff games, why are they not in San Francisco anymore, Big C?
Alex Boone, the other guard. Both guards are playing. Alex Boone's in Minnesota. Okay? So when you look at that, you got half your former starting offensive line starting on other NFL teams. Both tight ends are starting on other NFL teams, Charlton.
Yeah.
A wide receiver starting on another NFL team. A running back
Yeah.
starting on another NFL team. That's half of your offense that's gone to other teams, Charlton, and being productive. And all of those teams, Charlton, have better winning records than you.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 years. Those players that you let go helped other teams, Charlton, have winning records. What was the problem that you saw in these players, Charlton, that winning records were not satisfactory for?
Well, Big C, I think you bring up a very valid point. It's not necessarily the players, it's the organization, the front office. If Balky's still there, they're going to go through another season where they try to win 3 or 4 games. And if they keep Kaepernick, they're going to blame it on Kaepernick. I think right now the best thing for him to do is leave and just get away from where they don't want to win anymore. There's just something weird about it where they'd rather support guys that lose as opposed to keep players that know what it's like to get into a championship game. I just want to say this last segment is sponsored by one of our better programs coming up. Big C Sports is launching a clothing line coming up in January of 2017. And also, we're going to be offering athletic insurance for any sports team in the country, from the professional sports all the way down to your Pop Warner teams. You can get covered by tweeting out to Big C Sports, and also follow Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. Big C, the last thing I want to say, we talked about great players in the past, and sometimes when your days of playing are over, they become critical of other people. You look at one of the greatest organizations in sports, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers under the Rooneys. They've had 3 coaches that have all gone to Super Bowls, and Nolan, and then the last one is Tomlin, and before that, you have the good old boy that's on this TV right now. I'm forgetting his name. Coach Cowher. But Terry Bradshaw's been one of my favorite athletes as a young boy. I love the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Steel Curtain defense. Mean Joe Green, Dwight White, all these good old boys. Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount. They had a great football team. But now I even have Bradshaw criticizing the coach that's won over 100 games, Big C. Just happened to be Mike Tomlin. Just happened to be African American. If you win over 100 games and you have a Super Bowl, what's there to criticize, Big C? And they just won the division again this year, Big C.
Well, Charlton, I looked at those remarks by Bradshaw and felt they were way out of line. I don't know if they're out of character, but they're way out of line.
Yeah.
Because Bradshaw's been known to turn it up with a little moonshine like I do from time to time.
Oh, yeah, you good up us in the South. I understand it.
And so going on air, who knows what he had gone right off to there, but he spoke from his heart when he said that. But, when you think about that, he said he didn't feel that Tomlin was a great coach. Okay, Charlton, let's look at the Pittsburgh Steelers under his watch over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
During the regular season, okay, Charlton, 102 victories. Go out and find me 10 other coaches in the NFL over the last 10 years that have 102 victories. Okay, Charlton? Do that for me. And I'm going to give you time before the show is over.
Well, hold on. Let me Google it, Big C. Let me Google. I'm going to come off the top of my head and say Andy Reid and Belichick, and that should be about it, I think, Big C.
That's going to about cover it, Charlton. But when you look around at our brothers at Sports Center and Fox and all that, they're not going to say that. They're not going to draw that comparison. But when you look at what Tomlin has done, 5 divisional titles, Charlton, 5, okay? Count them, 5 divisional titles. And those coaches you just spoke about, the only other coaches who do that in the last 10 years in the NFL.
Yeah. All
right? Nobody else.
So wait, Big C. Are you saying we're going to fire Andy Reid and Coach Belichick? Is that what the Terry Bradshaw's saying, Big C?
But think about this. How many Super Bowls have Andy Reid been to and won?
Well, see, that's the problem I have with you. Why do you always care about the facts? Why can't you just be emotional like Terry Bradshaw drinking up moonshine? He probably doesn't know that he doesn't win a Super Bowl, Big C.
Okay, but he's been there, but he lost.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Coach Belichick is the only coach in the NFL with more Super Bowl victories than Mike Tomlin, okay?
Yeah.
The only active coach in the NFL with more Super Bowl victories than Mike Tomlin. So when you go across the board and you sit out there and say, okay, who's won Super Bowls? Okay, nobody's won more than Mike Tomlin other than one coach, Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Who's a better coach than Mike Tomlin? You might say Pete Carroll's been there twice in the Super Bowl in back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Okay, he's been there. But he's not a better coach. Because when you look at his record, he has not won more division titles than Mike Tomlin.
No, he hasn't.
Andy Reid, has been a yo-yo coach. He got fired a few years ago in Philadelphia for losing. Okay? Mike Tomlin hasn't been losing to Pittsburgh. He has constantly been winning. And he's been in a very competitive division. But for Terry Bradshaw, and he'll get a pass from the network and the rest of the boys in the league because of who he is. He has 4 Super Bowl titles. But he got one of those as a gift because Joe Gilliam had taken the Steelers to the crest for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And they replaced him with Terry Bradshaw because they knew it would be an easy win. All they had to do was hand the ball off to Franco Harris and Rocky Blythe, throw a couple of quick passes to John Stallworth and Lynn Swan.
Yeah.
And they would have a Super Bowl win. And that's what they did because they had that great defense. But Terry Bradshaw, being national spokesperson for Fox, should be embarrassed about making that statement.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting there with Jimmy Johnson on the same broadcast table with him. Yes, Jimmy Johnson won 3 Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys, actually 2 with the Dallas Cowboys before he was gone.
Yeah.
And he never duplicated that anywhere else. He was with the Dolphins and was only lukewarm down there. But for Terry Bradshaw to make that statement about Mike Tomlin, and he's never crashed into the broadcast, off the broadcast, onto the field as coaching because he could not translate, onto the field what he knew as a player. I remember Thomas Hollywood Henderson. great linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
Dallas Cowboys under Tom Landry.
Amazing.
Number one draft pick out of Liberty University. Langston University. Not Liberty, Langston University.
Yeah.
And Holden Henderson, and probably was one of the greatest athletes to play defense in the NFL. I remember him making a comment about Terry Bradshaw back in the 70s, early 80s. But he said, he didn't think Bradshaw was too intelligent, which he demonstrated in talking about right now.
Yeah.
He said he would have a hard time spelling cat if he gave the first 2 letters.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to leave that alone with Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah.
That's what the synopsis is of Bradshaw's thoughts about Mike Tomlin.
Well, Big C, I think it's almost a shame when these good old boys would talk about not hiring black players to coach because they don't have the capacity to think, and not hiring them to be quarterbacks or drafting them to be quarterbacks because, they just can't think. That was the good old boy garbage back in the day. Now they're even brazen enough to say it publicly. We should put this guy named Dak Prescott on the bench because he's in first place with the best record in the NFL, but we should bench him. And then Thomas, that's won a Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's fire him because he's only won, along with 2 other coaches over the last 2 years, over 100 games, Reed and also Belichick. I'm not going to say it's about color, but that's the only thing I can find outside of I just don't like a guy who wins. But it's a shame. Maybe Terry Bradshaw has a little bit of CTE. He was slammed on his head a couple of times. I just hate to see some of my favorite players back in the day. I'm going back 30, 40 years. Obviously, people can have a personality that you may not agree with publicly, but at least be accurate. If I'm calling for someone to bench LeBron James because he's not what he was 5 years ago, then why would I have a job as a broadcaster? If I'm dumb enough to say, let's take someone like Tiger Woods or Phil Mickelson and take away their golf clubs because they're not winning Masters every year, then take away my microphone. If I'm also knucklehead enough to say that one of the winningest coaches in the history of the NFL should be fired because he's just a cheerleader, then what makes me talented enough and accurate enough to keep stealing paychecks from my network? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I look at this, Charlton. How many of these white losing quarterbacks have they been a call for to bench? Anybody
None.
talk about benching Blake Bortles down in Jacksonville?
No.
Anybody talk about benching Andrew Luck and he has only won 7 games this year, Charlton?
No.
Anybody gone around the league and talked about, hey, Carson Wentz, this rookie who, had these great expectations after the first 3 games and has stumbled.
Yeah.
Let's bench him. Nobody said that in Philadelphia. They said he's developing. His excuse is that he's developing. And we look around the league, Charlton, at all these sub-500 teams. Okay? No one's talking about benching these quarterbacks. No one's talking about benching Kirk Cousins. The Redskins are sub-500. They're talking about giving him $24 million next year, Charlton.
Yeah.
For being a sub-500 quarterback. So there's no parity in the NFL when we look at talent. When you're an African American and you win and you're productive, you're marginalized as far as income. It's a fight, it's a struggle. We look at Russell Wilson out in Seattle.
Yeah.
Consistently winning division titles, Charlton, over the last 4 years. Couple Super Bowls, couple of division titles beyond that. And no one is talking about him as far as the era of greatness. Yes, Matt Ryan will get more publicity in Atlanta than what a Russell Wilson will be. How long has Matt Ryan been in the NFL? Twice as long as a Russell Wilson. How many Super Bowl appearances he has? 0.
No, not at all.
He's the number 1 overall draft pick, okay? Russell Wilson was just like Dak Prescott. A 3rd-round draft pick versus Prescott being a 4th-round draft pick, Johnson. You saw Matthew Stafford last night.
Yeah.
A former number 1 overall draft pick. How many times has he been in the Super Bowl?
None.
0.
Well,
Russell Wilson?
Yeah.
Twice, Johnson. So when we look at the status quo of these guys that are drafted number 1 overall, and Bradshaw was one of those guys, Johnson.
Yeah.
Drafted number 1 overall. They have this thing that they get this pass. Regardless of how good or how bad we are, Johnson, they get this pass. You can be mediocre.
Yeah.
Throughout your professional career, but you always have this potential, this thing called white potential, because they would not have drafted you at the level that they drafted you, a la Jared Goff in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
He would not have been the number 1 draft pick if he didn't have the potential of a Matt Ryan, a Matthew Stafford, a Terry Bradshaw. These guys, Charlton, when you look at the Super Bowl in the modern era, and you think about the quarterbacks that have been to the Super Bowl in the modern era, you're hard-pressed to find that many number 1 overall draft picks Charleston, that have won Super Bowls. And you can go back to the first 2 Super Bowls with Bart Starr, Charleston, with the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
Bart Starr was a 13th round draft pick out of Alabama. Won the first 2 Super Bowls. All right? Not until Joe Davis won Super Bowl 3 that he was the number 1 draft pick out of Alabama, but Alabama quarterbacks won the first 3 Super Bowls.
Well, Big C,
I think was the number 6 round draft pick out of Purdue, won Super Bowl 4.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you look at quarterbacks that have won Super Bowl, Joe Theismann was a Super Bowl winner. He was a free agent quarterback. All right? He wasn't even drafted. Russell Wilson, a 3rd round draft pick. Tom Brady, a 6th round draft pick. We know how many Super Bowls he's won. Joe Montana, a 3rd round draft pick. How many Super Bowls did he win? Johnson, you go up and down the list at these quarterbacks. Johnny Unitas, 17th round draft pick.
Wow.
Okay? Earl Moore, a 14th round draft pick. So when you look at these quarterbacks that have been there in the Super Bowl and have been productive and won, Johnson, when John Gruden got his claim, it's out of Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
He was a 6th round draft pick out of Florida State with the Vikings. He wasn't a number 1 draft pick. So when you look at these quarterbacks that have been there on the big stage and consistently gotten their teams to the Super Bowl, Brett Favre, a 2nd round draft pick.
Yeah.
He wasn't a 1st round draft pick. NFL's all-time leading passer. So it's not about being a number 1 draft pick, Johnson. It's about being a talent. So when you think about these GMs who say they know it all and they can draft this guy who's a quarterback in the future, I listen to Bill Polian all the time. And he talk about the upside of players. Okay? Bill Polian fell into 2 good situations. He was in Buffalo, okay? Jim Kelly was not a number 1 draft pick.
Yeah.
He was a free agency from the USFL.
Right.
All right? When Polian was in Buffalo. He was a refugee coming to Buffalo, took him to 4 Super Bowls. He and Frank Wright. And Frank Wright was a lower round draft pick, taking him through that playoff run, even though he didn't get to start in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So when these guys talk about being geniuses, even Steve Young was a free agent cast off from Tampa Bay because he was unsuccessful. Tampa Bay went to San Francisco where he had to learn. Tampa Bay had 2 quarterbacks that they had. So we want to talk about the genius of an organization. They had 2 quarterbacks that they cast off, Johnson, that won Super Bowl championships. Doug Williams was first, Steve Young was the second.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's tell you the genius of organizations that don't know how to evaluate or hold on to talent.
Well, big.
An organization that couldn't win gave away before they won a Super Bowl 2 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks.
Well, let me ask you this question as we close out. Final section by BeneathThisWingsFoundation.org and CYN Entertainment. When you talk about players that can make a difference at the next level, in the national championship, the Final Four, you talk about the player at Clemson, Deshaun Watson. You have J.T. Barrett at Ohio State. There's a kid out of Washington by the name of Browning. And then the good old boy down in Alabama, he's going to live Fred, so we won't even talk about him. These 2 players for Clemson and Ohio State have their teams back in the national championship picture. They both, Ohio State and Clemson, have been there the last 2 years, either one of those teams. Well, is there any talk of any of these quarterbacks being a top draft pick, a first rounder, not a second or third round, but a first round draft pick? They both remind me of Dak Prescott. Your thoughts?
You look at John Watson, Johnson. He's been devalued this year as far as his ability. Last year they talked about he'd be the clear number 1 draft pick coming out of the draft year that came out after his junior year.
Yeah.
But he decided that his education was even more important. He knew he would make his NFL money. Now they're talking about they don't even know if there's a quarterback worthy of a 1st round draft pick in the NFL. So you're going to tell me that Deshaun Watson is not better than either one of those egotistical guys that they had set up last year to be 1 and 2 in the draft. But they pimped around, tell everybody how great they would be.
Yeah, Wentz and Goff. Yeah, Wentz and Goff, yeah.
You got one guy who can't take a snap. The other guy who can't read the defense and throw the ball more than 25 yards down the field, okay?
Yeah.
This is the problem that you have. You have Deshaun Watson, who is just a pure talent at quarterback, has consistently won in college, Johnson, on the biggest stage against the biggest players during prime time, has gone out and outshined them. Yes, he's come up twice, second in the Heisman balloting, but that's no knock on his talent.
Right.
When you talk about a pure passer with mobility, he's a more athletic Dak Prescott. He has a better arm than Dak Prescott. He has more mobility. So he would be even a rich man's Dak Prescott. So this is what the NFL is fighting back against, Johnson. We've had Zach Prescott. And what number does Zach Prescott wear with the Dallas?
Number 4.
Number 4. Same number that, the kid at Alabama, Deshaun Watson. That Clemson.
Clemson. Yeah.
Okay? He wears number 4. So that's striking similarity in the NFL mind. We bring in another kid who wears number 4. Look at what we're in for. All of a sudden, all of what we did last year, this parading of Goff and Wentz up and down Madison Avenue, how great they were going to be for the NFL.
Yeah.
Yet they couldn't strike a match if they were the box.
I understand.
So this is not what the NFL wants to see. They don't want to see Deshaun Watson be the number 1 overall pick a year after these 2 great franchise quarterbacks come in and lead a team to a winning record. Now what does that do to Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, and the rest of these so-called draft, experts, Bill Polian, who's saying that a guy is not ready or a guy is ready?
Yeah.
And Deshaun Watson comes in and outplays him just like a Zach Prescott. Back-to-back years talking to an African-American quarterback come out of college and outplay these so-called franchise quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Everybody's hyped.
Yeah.
What does that do for their scouting system? What does that do for their mojo going out telling these the people who are listening, and the fans know that these guys can play.
I agree.
They know who can't play. But what does this do for these experts? What does it do for their job security? So right now, all the draft experts, they're blasting Deshaun Watson, saying that he's not ready.
Yeah.
He's not worthy of being a number 1 draft pick. He could be a high second-round draft pick. Why devalue this guy? Why, Charles? Because he's a great African-American talent that can come in and win for you. And if you can get him as a winning quarterback for 4 years and you don't have to pay him $10 million in a total package, that's great because you drafted number 1 overall. You got to guarantee him $26 million.
Well, Big C, I think.
If I can get it for less than 10, let's do it that way. Let's use this collusion thing that we have with the NFL.
Yeah.
We won't draft him. We're going to let him come back around to the second round so you can get him as the first or second selection in the second round. But we're going to use this collusion thing that the NFL has when they ran the USFL out of business, when they ran the World Football League out of business. I'm not going to draft him. We're just going to get together as owners and GMs. We're not going to draft him. We're going to let him go to the second round. So when he comes in, we won't have to pay him $26 million. We can get him for $8 million and be successful for the next 4 years.
Well, Big C, ironically, when I hear some of the talk that you're saying right now, the fact of the matter is, we call it real talk. The NFL, the brass of the NFL, the guys that needed the Rooney Rule just to give African-American coaches a chance, they don't want to see a league dominated by black quarterbacks, even if it helps them win. They still want that white image. They think that's what the consumers want from the sponsors and the advertisers. I think the NBA has already proved them wrong. They just want to see people win, whether you're black or white. But these owners, they still have that good old boy mentality, and they're part of that same segregationist unit, even though they hire black guys to work for them and make them money. If you look like you could be the face of that franchise, there's still some pushback in our society. And unfortunately, if you can't have equality in the NFL or the NBA as an African-American athlete, then how can you get it in the boardroom or in the broadcast booth? That's why I'm disappointed with Terry Bradshaw coming down on a coach that's he's among the top 3 winningest coaches in the NFL over the last 10 years. And he's up against that good old boy network, and he's winning anyway. And even though he's winning, they're still saying, well, we need to bring in somebody white because he fits in on the golf course, or we need a white quarterback because he's going to be the guy that people want to buy tickets to come see. Do you really tell me this? Watching the game last night with Stafford and Prescott, who cares who's black and white outside of the media? If you were to tell me one guy's making $100+ million contract and the other guy's only making about $1 million, you couldn't tell me that anyone would choose that Stafford should be making more than Prescott, even though in reality is he makes a lot more, Big C. And that's how the NFL brass wants. They still want the white guy to be the leader of their team, even if they lose. And they're proving that time and time again, Big C. I just want to get your thoughts. Will there be any talk of this Rooney Rule getting better? Or is it just still a farce, Big C, as we go into the head coaching carousel, Big C? One more time.
Well, Charlton, you ever gone into a new car dealership?
Yeah.
Have you ever walked into
Yeah.
a car dealership?
Yeah.
And when you open up a new car door, what does it do? It smells luxury.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
It makes you want to get inside. It invites you in, okay?
Yeah.
It invites you in. Then you see the sticker price, you sticker shock, don't you?
Yeah.
like, damn, you know, I want this.
Well, it may not bother you, Big C. I went to your house one time. I thought I was at a car dealership. There's so many new cars, so I don't know about sticker shop to some people. Go ahead, see.
But that's the Rooney Rule, okay? We're gonna invite you in, but we're gonna say right now we just can't afford to take the chance on you, okay?
Yeah.
Just like you can't afford to buy a certain car, we can't afford to take the chance. The organization is not ready. The community is not ready for that. That's what the Rooney Rule is. It's like going to the Bentley dealership and dreaming big, okay?
Wait a minute. I'm putting my eyes on this Bentley Continental GT. It's so choice, and it had my name all over it, Big C. It's black and it's gorgeous, so I'm buying it. I don't care if I have sticker shock or not. It's a gorgeous car. It's funny you brought up the Bentley, Big C. Go ahead.
But you know, when you look at that Bentley, everybody admires it going down the street, okay?
Yeah.
It's like the African American athlete, Charlton. When he has his jersey and his helmet on, everybody admires him on the field. Okay?
Yeah.
And you think about the success that they have, and you think about the leadership that they've demonstrated throughout their playing careers. And I think about one of the most intelligent players I ever saw on the football field after I played, and that was Ed Reed, the safety.
Oh, yeah.
Baltimore Ravens. I haven't seen a player, Charlton, more intelligent than him. I would
Amazing.
Ed Reed when I would watch a game just to see what he would do, where he would position himself, what he would call defensively. But this guy is not even a defensive coordinator or defensive assistant with any team, Charlton. When you look around the NFL, to be an assistant as an African-American, Charlton, you generally have to be working under an African-American head coach.
Yeah.
Where was the coach from Cleveland working? You know, Hugh Jackson. Where was he working at before he got the job in Cleveland?
In Oakland.
No, he was working in Cincinnati, Charlton.
Okay, before Cincinnati, Oakland, then to Cincinnati. Yeah, you're right, Big C.
He was working under Marvin Lewis to get the job, Charlton. That's how he got the job. It wasn't because he was, you know, getting a job elsewhere. Because you're going to tell me the rest of the teams around the league didn't recognize the defensive talents of him? Cleveland is just devoid of talent, Charlton. But that's what the Rooney Rule is, Charlton. It's going into a Bentley dealership, looking around, and that's what these organizations do. They look around and say, hey, you know, we looked at you, you look nice. I mean, you're prestigious and all. You got all the talents and attributes that we want, but we're just not ready for you. We're going to go in the direction of this guy. We feel he fits what we're looking for. What the hell are you looking for when you're losing organization, Charles?
Yeah, I agree.
I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. When you're a losing organization, what are you looking for? It's just like with Jacksonville. Losing organization, Charlton.
Yeah.
What are they looking at? Tom Coughlin, who had 5 successive losing seasons with the Giants.
Wow.
Why? Because he could no longer communicate with the younger player, Charlton. He could no longer transcend that time barrier that they had between them, that social gap, Charlton. He was not part of that echelon of young players and young talent coming out of college. And I want everybody who listens to our program understand that sports is social.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what sports is. It's social and political. And so unless you have a coach like a Mike Tomlin who can identify with that player that's coming out. But Jack Del Rio in Oakland went to school in Southern California, USC.
Yeah.
He was right there in the inner city Los Angeles around some of the greatest athletes, African American and white, because he was an All-American catcher on the baseball team.
Yeah.
So he played all sports, so he knew how to transcend, and he coached in Jacksonville before, Charlton. But when you look around at these coaches in the carousel that's out there, and the younger coaches are the successful coaches, Pete Carroll, where did he come from prior to getting to Seattle? Yes, he had been in New England, he had been with the Jets, but he had not learned. So he went to USC, Charlton, where he could better identify with the modern athlete of today, okay?
Yeah.
And when he learned how to deal with those younger athletes, look at the age of his team in Seattle. See how old it is. It's not an old, crusty veteran team. It's more the younger, modern players that he had.
Yeah.
And he identifies with those players, Charlton, because he went back to college to learn how to coach those players and came back to the NFL much more prepared than he was in his first go-around. And this is what you get, Charlton. You get that when you have coaches that can do that, and you need the minority implant of coaches. You need that fingerprint, and that will bring you success. Stop being afraid to say, hey, these guys are just as good, because they are.
Yeah.
And unless you give them the opportunity or you just steadfast on losing, that's where your organization will be. You want to win, let them come in.
Well, Big C, I challenge any program out there to go back and look at the archives of when we were talking about the OTAs, the players that you thought would be good players in the NFL. You talked about Prescott, you talked about Elliott, and you talked about several other players that have come on to play great. And I look at all of my guys, especially Dilfer. And I like Dilfer when he played at Fresno State under the great, I think he played under Jim Sweeney, Big C. And when they...
Let me tell you something about Dilfer, okay, Charles?
Yeah.
You ever been by Krispy Kreme donuts?
Oh, yeah.
Love them. Okay, what is the sign that they have that draws everybody in?
I don't know. I don't read the sign. I just look for the Krispy Kreme.
They got a sign. It says they're hot.
Oh, okay.
And that's different. When a player's hot, you know, it's like what Richard Pryor said, you know, when he was a kid, and, you know, he straight after school.
Yeah.
And whichever side was winning, it's my side. That's Trent Dilfer, okay?
That's funny.
Dilfer doesn't have a clue. But, you know, if you're hot and you're trendy, Trent Dilfer's going to be on your side. Okay, that's where he is. Be a trendsetter, Trent. Go out there on a limb, just like you said. Players sit down and shut up. Just play the game like you did. You sit down and shut up because you were a bench warmer more in your career than when you were a starter.
Or at least say you were wrong when you were wrong, and don't just keep jumping on the bandwagon and follow the next good thing, Big C. I also want to say, as we close, I want to thank, you know, Ronda Rousey. She's fighting on Friday in the UFC. She's a great fighter. She's going against Amanda Nunes. Ronda, thanks for following Big C Sports on Facebook. I also want to say, Big C, every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide, follow Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. And as we always tell you, there's never any excuse for domestic violence. No woman should ever have to go through that type of garbage. And as we always tell you, every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.